Welcome to Module 3, Business Analysis Planning and Monitoring. This is one of the most foundational knowledge areas in the BABOK Guide. It describes how a business analyst plans, manages, and tracks their own work. Think of it as the project management of business analysis. It doesn't deal with the project's overall plan, but rather the BA's plan within the project. So, before a BA even begins eliciting requirements or designing solutions, they must first answer, how will I conduct my analysis? Who will I involve? What standards will I follow? How will I measure success? That's exactly what this module is about, setting up that framework so every BA activity is organized, traceable, and value-driven. By the end of this module, you'll be able to plan business analysis work effectively, define a structured approach and engagement strategy, establish governance for accountability and consistency, apply practical techniques like RACI, SWOT, and lessons learned. In other words, we'll learn to plan, manage, and measure our own work, just like a project manager does for the project. If you've ever been in a project where people said, "Wait, who's approving this?" or "Where's that document stored?" this module will fix those gaps once and for all. Business analysis planning and monitoring is basically the management side of business analysis. This knowledge area ensures your work as a BA is not reactive, but structured, traceable, and aligned with business needs. The BABOK framework identifies 5 key deliverables: a business analysis plan, your roadmap for BA work, a governance approach, rules and approvals, a stakeholder engagement plan, your communication strategy, an information management plan, where and how information is stored, performance improvement recommendations, to get better over time. So, when people think analysis is just about writing requirements, this slide is your reminder that professional analysis starts with planning how to do it right. Every engagement begins with a simple question: how are we going to do this? That's the purpose of defining your business analysis approach. Now, there are 2 dominant approaches you need to understand: predictive, plan-driven, and adaptive, change-driven. Let's bring these to life. A predictive approach is like building a bridge. Every detail is planned before you pour the first drop of concrete. You rely on documentation, clear phases, and formal change control. In contrast, an adaptive approach is like designing a mobile app. You release small increments, gather feedback, and evolve rapidly. In reality, many organizations use a hybrid of both. For instance, requirements might be initially documented predictively, but later refined adaptively in agile sprints. As a CBAP professional, your job is to choose the right approach for the environment, considering risks, complexity, and stakeholder readiness. Once the approach is defined, we need to decide who we'll work with and how we'll engage them. This is the human side of business analysis, stakeholder engagement. Now, you've probably seen this in real life, a technically perfect solution that fails because one influential stakeholder wasn't aligned. That's why stakeholder planning is critical. The steps are simple but powerful. Identify every stakeholder: internal, external, users, regulators, sponsors, vendors. Analyze their power and interest, using tools like the Power Interest Grid. Define engagement methods: one-on-one sessions, workshops, or communication dashboards. For example, during a CRM rollout, you might engage the sales director with weekly demos, but keep the finance team informed through monthly summaries. Remember, good stakeholder engagement prevents surprises. Techniques like RACI matrix, stakeholder analysis, and interviews help you do it systematically. Now, let's move into governance, the structure that keeps your analysis under control. Governance answers 3 vital questions: who makes decisions? How are changes handled? How do we trace approvals? In real projects, governance prevents confusion and rework. Let's say a product manager requests a new feature halfway through a sprint. Without governance, that could derail development. With governance, there's a defined change control process. Maybe small changes go to the BA, larger ones go to a change control board. We also set decision-making authority, who approves what, and traceability procedures, so every requirement can be tracked to its source. Techniques like decision modeling, RACI matrix, and process modeling formalize this. The goal is accountability, making sure decisions are clear, consistent, and visible. Next, let's talk about how we manage our analysis information, because let's face it, BA work generates tons of documents, models, and notes. Information management defines how all that content will be stored, accessed, and reused. The goal? Prevent chaos. No more outdated requirements sitting on someone's desktop. You'll want to define where documents live, for example. SharePoint, Confluence, who can edit or view them, how versions are tracked, and how information is secured and retained. For example, in a healthcare project, you might use role-based access for confidentiality. Business users see summaries, while developers access detailed specs. It's also about traceability, connecting requirements to test cases, to designs, and to business goals. When done right, you can answer any audit question confidently, with a single document trail. Okay, now let's look at continuous improvement. Because business analysis isn't a one-time act, it's an evolving discipline. This is where you measure how efficient and effective your analysis process is and identify areas to improve. BABOK highlights two performance dimensions: efficiency, how well used resources, time, and effort; effectiveness, how well your results met stakeholder expectations. Let's say you delivered requirements on time, but the development team found many gaps. That's low effectiveness. Or maybe you did great analysis, but spent double the planned time. That's low efficiency. So, BAs use tools like SWOT analysis to find strengths and weaknesses, root cause analysis to fix issues, and lessons learned to share knowledge across projects. Continuous improvement is what turns a good BA into an exceptional one. It builds professional maturity. Here's a quick recap of the key techniques that support everything we've discussed. RACI matrix clarifies accountability. Stakeholder analysis identifies influence and engagement strategies. SWOT analysis assesses readiness and risks. Lessons learnt captures insights to avoid repeating mistakes. Process modeling visualizes workflows and decision flows. These techniques aren't just for theory, they're the tools of your trade. Use them regularly, and your analysis becomes structured, transparent, and defensible. One of the most overlooked lessons is that planning and monitoring connect to everything else in business analysis. Here's how. Strategy analysis defines the goals that your plan must align with. Elicitation and collaboration follows the engagement methods you designed. Requirements lifecycle management relies on your governance rules. Requirements analysis and design definition builds on your planned approach. Solution evaluation measures performance improvements you initiated. In other words, this knowledge area is the spine of the BABOK framework. If you plan well here, every other area runs smoother. Let's make all this practical with a real-world example. You're the BA for a CRM system implementation across sales, marketing, and customer service. Here's what your work might look like. You define an adaptive BA approach, since requirements will evolve with user feedback. You conduct a stakeholder analysis, identifying key influencers like the sales director and IT lead. You set up governance, with a change control board for approvals above $10,000. You define an information management plan, hosting documentation on SharePoint with access controls. And you implement continuous improvement, holding retrospectives, and tracking sprint velocity. Notice how all 5 planning elements come together: approach, engagement, governance, information, and improvement, working as one cohesive system. Let's wrap up this module with the core ideas to remember. Organization is essential. A clear plan keeps your analysis focused and traceable. Governance drives success. Defined decision rights prevent confusion and delays. Continuous improvement fuels excellence. Reflection and metrics help you grow. 5 key outputs: your BA approach, stakeholder engagement plan, governance approach, information management plan, and performance assessment form the foundation of professional analysis. If you master these 5, you'll never feel lost in a project again. And for your CBAP exam, remember, most scenario questions in this area test your judgment, not your memory. They'll ask, given this situation, which approach or plan should the BA create? Now, you'll know exactly how to think through that. In the next module, we'll move from planning into elicitation and collaboration, where the real conversations with stakeholders begin.